You are listening to WHIP, Philly's #1 college radio station. This is John Cole, Ed LeFurge, Kevin Rowley, and we have a special guest right now. We have the Phillies beat writer from the Bucks County Courier-Times, Northeast Philly resident, Kevin Cooney. Kevin, how you doing today?
Hi, John. How are you?
Doing great. We appreciate you taking a couple minutes out of your day to join us here in Temple Sports Hour.
Not a problem.
All right, sounds good. So, Kevin, we'll start off with a Phillies question. Unfortunately, the season did not go as planned. We finished last place in the National League East, 73 wins, 89 losses. Not many bright spots, but if you had to pick one player on the offensive end that impressed you the most this year, who was it?
Wow, that's pretty tough because their offense obviously struggled. I mean, if you look at it, I think Marlon Byrd had a pretty good year given what you expected. You know, obviously, he's probably not a true 4 or 5 hole hitter at this point, but he gave you a decent amount of numbers. Other than that, really, the rest of Jimmy Rollins, I should take that back. Jimmy Rollins had a good kind of bounce back year. It wasn't great, but it was good given his age. Everybody worried about a decline. He kind of steadied the ship. But other than that, I know everybody's going to mention about, Ben Revere at the top of the lineup. Ben Revere's still not getting on base enough. He doesn't walk. You know, his stolen bases obviously were pretty good, around 50, but he has no power, and if he's not getting on base at a 370, 380 clip, and I apologize, there's a lot of noise here. I'm down at Camden Yards. That becomes a problem, and so really, you're talking about a team that has multiple holes to fill in its lineup going into next year.
Yeah, this is hey Kevin, this is Kevin Rowley, Temple Sports Hour. Thanks for coming on. So there have been rumors that Ryan Howard may have played his last game as a Philly. Who do you see at first base next year? Maybe Chase Utley, where he played early in his career, or Maikel Franco?
You see, it's one of the things, Kevin, that they have multiple options on. I mean, Utley is the logical one because it would help preserve kind of his legs. He really wore down past May. His numbers declined. You wonder if maybe the toll of playing second base every day kind of took its toll. The other option is obviously Maikel Franco. They have, down rough. So when you add all that together, that makes it, I think, unlikely that Ryan Howard's going to be back with this team. I mean, if you look at it, they're willing to eat most, if not all, of the salary at this point. So do I think they'll just outright release him? No. But I think that they will basically give him away for pennies on the dollar just to open up a spot. That was one thing when I talked to Pat Gillick a couple weeks ago. Gillick said, if we have to eat money to let guys play who we think will be here in the long term as Phillies, they're willing to do it. So I think that there are 2 guys that kind of fit that description. One will be Howard, and the other would be Jonathan Papelbon, who obviously right now is blocking the way for Ken Giles.
And Kevin, Ed LeFurge here for Temple Sports Hour. We thank you for giving us a few minutes today. One thing, another big question surrounding this Phillies team is general manager Ruben Amaro. He came in 2009, and everybody has been kind of skeptical on what type of job he's done so far. What do you think his future is with the team?
Well, he has a year left on his contract. It's pretty obvious he's going to come back for 2015. Beyond that, when you look at the Amaro question, you have to tie it in with every other question. I mean, obviously one of Ruben's biggest backers has been David Montgomery, and David now obviously out on medical leave because of his cancer surgery. There's questions whether David's going to come back or not, whether John Middleton will buy the club. It all is tied together. I mean, in my mind, Ruben has to show improvement this year. Now, given where they are does improvement mean make the playoffs? No, that's not realistic. Improvement has to be, you have to show that you have a core that you can build going forward. And that even still may not be enough for Ruben getting a contract extension beyond this year. It's going to be interesting to see where the organization goes, but I think Ruben's fate is directly tied in to whatever the fate is with, David and his recovery, David Montgomery, and quite honestly, Pat Gillett going forward. I mean, because Pat, while interim team president, he is 77 years old. He is still splitting time kind of between the West Coast and Philly in this interim role. So I think expecting him to continue this long term is a little unrealistic. So that, again, leads to the power vacuum question, which is at play for this organization.
Joining us on WHIP right now for Temple Sports Hour is Phillies beat writer Kevin Cooney. Kevin, this is John Cole again. And Amaro's been here for 5 years now. He's about to enter his sixth season as GM. If you had to give him a letter grade for his performance thus far, what would you give him?
Well, I mean, do you take the first three or do you take the last three? I mean, the first three, 09, 10, 11, he was aggressive. He had a deep farm system to play with. It allowed him to make some moves. And obviously the Phillies were in playoff contention. The last three, he's not shown an ability to make moves and piece things together and, quite honestly, to say goodbye. Now, part of that is also David Montgomery, who was extremely loyal and who may have forced the hands on some of those contract issues. Jimmy Rollins, Cole Hamels, Chase Utley, all, we believe, were more the hands of Montgomery than anybody. So I would say a C to a C minus at this point, and it's pretty clear that if Ruben doesn't get it done next year, and especially with the way attendance is with this club, that he'll probably pay the price for the failures.
Kev, the Phillies still have a pretty good bunch of tradable players like Cole Hamels. I compared having Cole Hamels to owning a Cadillac when your house is in foreclosure. I don't understand. Do you think they might trade Hamels or even Utley in the offseason?
Well, Utley has 10-5 right, so I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think he has any interest right now, at least in the short term of moving. Hamels is a different thing. I know there was the Howard Eskin report a couple weeks ago about the Phillies looking to move Hamels, trying to get a blockbuster that would change the face of the franchise. It's still pretty tough to me to trade a 30-year-old who should get Cy Young votes. I mean, he should be a top 5 guy in the Cy Young voting. I know he didn't have a lot of wins, but if you go by the newspaper metric kind of thinking, I mean, his year is kind of where, look, he's not going to win it. Kershaw's going to win it. But, I mean, his year was as good as Felix Hernandez a couple years ago. I mean, that type of year where all his numbers except for wins were at the top of the class. So do you really want to mortgage that, especially with a team that right now has so many starting pitching issues? Why not just keep the one guy and solidify what you have, knowing that right now you're kind of in a little bit of a lurch if you get rid of them?
Sure, and now talking off-season moves and possibly trading some players, do you think the Phillies could sign anybody this off-season, big names? And if so, what positions do you think that they'll address?
Well, they have to look at the outfield. I think whatever moves they're going to make is going to have to be for trades. And it's not – they're already hamstrung with their salaries as far as they have so many long-term contracts. You have to redo the outfield. You have to redo center field. You have to redo left field. You have to make a decision on Dominic Brown. He's arbitration eligible for the first time. He strikes me as a change of scenery guy that, he may play better, but it's never going to happen here. So those are the areas they have to target. They have to target also starting pitching, obviously. Their bullpen for the first time in years is fine, probably going back to that 08 team. You don't think they have to touch their bullpen, but they have to touch, obviously the 2 outfield spots. They have to upgrade in at least 3 starting pitching spots. And you have to, quite honestly, you have to look at the way this franchise is, again, do you spend money right now on an older unit trying to put it together, trying to hope it stays together, because quite honestly, this is how you got in the mess.
Joining us on WHIP right now for Temple Sports Hour is Kevin Cooney. Now, Kevin, this was the first full season as manager under Ryan Sandberg. What did you think of his first season? Do you think he did a pretty good job or what?
Honestly, I thought he was disappointing. We saw a lot of miscommunication issues with the veterans. And the strange part is I'm not sure Sandberg has a faction in that locker room that's for him. There are some guys who come in and ruffle the feathers of veterans, and the kids love him because that means he's playing them a lot. Well, Sandberg ran the same lineup out there every day, pretty much. Ran Howard, ran Utley, ran Rollins, all that. And, take an example. He sits Howard for 3 games in July. It causes the firestorm. He doesn't really talk to Howard about it. And then he goes to, he uses Darren Ruff, makes it clear that Darren Ruff is going to be part of a protocol platoon. And then suddenly, it just totally disappears. Now, how much of that was coming from above, we don't know. But, quite honestly, that's what causes trouble for a manager. When you don't have a kind of a constituency in your locker room, that's what really gets managers in trouble.
Kevin, it's pretty clear at this point that Ken Giles is the closer of the future. Do you think the Phillies could get something for Jonathan Papelbon straight up, or would they have to eat a lot of that contract?
They're not going to have any luck trading Papelbon unless they pick up almost all the salary. And quite honestly, it's at a point I know he's still one of the premier. He actually had a really good year. But I think that if you risk bringing him back, you end up inviting trouble, in my mind. You've got to just let him go. Because you're blocking Giles. And if you bring him back here and, there's any question about the future, okay, and who's going to be the guy in charge and who's going to do all this and all that, then you're inviting just a real potential for a disaster and a clubhouse problem. So I think right now they're going to have to find a way to move him in the offseason.
And now we're getting close to the end of the segment here with Kevin Cooney, Phillies beat reporter. And Kevin, give us your World Series prediction and your World Series MVP.
Well, right now, I'm in Baltimore. Kansas City has been the story of this playoff, and I think, it's been wonderful to see that franchise be resurgent. But if you look at it in all phases of the game, I think the Orioles are better with their starting pitching. I think their Oriole bullpen is a lot better. Oriole lineup is better, and the Orioles have a better manager. So I'm going Baltimore in 6. Kansas City kind of strikes me as a team that is like a mid-major that gets through to the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament. You sit around for a week and, they hear everybody talk about how great they are. Well, then you have to go play, and that normally is where the road ends. In the National League, I like the Cardinals in a really good series. And in the end, I like the Cardinals over the Orioles at this point. But it's been such a wild playoff. I don't rule anything out.
It has been a wild playoffs, Kevin. And I think that'd be really disappointing for us Phillies fans to see the Cardinals hoist that trophy once again, because I really liked your tweet the other day mentioning how the Cardinals fans were complaining that they believed Joe Buck was biased against them, and how ridiculous that sounds.
But John, here's one thing I don't get, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You have to admire what the Cardinals do. The Cardinals do this year after year, and the Cardinals should be the blueprint for the Phillies because, quite honestly, they learned how to say goodbye. They let Pujols walk. You're talking a Hall of Famer, maybe the second best Cardinal of all time.
Sure.
Let him walk. You've got to learn to be a little cold, and you know how to, and they learned how to develop for the minor league system. That's something that this organization has absolutely gone away from in the last 3-4 years.
I guess most of my hatred for the Cardinals is due to the fact of their, it's mostly jealousy just because how successful they've been in the past decade for the most part. And one last question before we get on out of here. When you joined us in studio last year, we previewed the season in April, and we really appreciate you coming in. And you talked about, I believe you have, will you have your Hall of Fame vote next year, or is it this year?
Yeah, this year, first time.
All right, excellent, Kevin. And curious, it was really interesting. Keith Urban had a really nice segment on 25 Years in Exile about Pete Rose, about how, that he's been out of baseball for 25 years. He believes he should be reinstated. Now, if given the opportunity, if Pete Rose was on the ballot, would you vote for him?
Well, it would go to the Veterans Committee because it's out of the baseball writer's hands, even if Pete was reinstated, because he's past the time frame. My own opinion would be that Pete the player belongs in.
Absolutely.
But Pete's actions and his stall tactics and the way he's kind of, I was up at Cooperstown a couple of years ago, and him on Main Street selling himself pretty much, the autograph shows, taking away from the rest of the Hall of Famers. I think that, to me, disrespects the Hall, disrespects the game, and I think I would hold it against him and kind of push it down the line.
All right, Kevin, we really appreciate you taking a couple minutes out of your day. Enjoy yourself in Baltimore, and please call in again anytime you want.
Not a problem. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Kevin. That was Philadelphia Phillies beat writer Kevin Cooney from the Bucks County Courier-Times. He's one of the best in the business right there.